All right, we're going to attempt maybe 3 verses tonight. Daniel 9, verse 20. Okay, so we've made it through the prayer. The prayer is basically the first half of it. Verse 20 verses is prayer. Daniel 9, 20. And whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mount of my God. Now, it's an odd thing. He says, why is he praying and what's he praying for? This is the one thing I've been looking for, and I finally found it. He's praying for Jerusalem, the holy mount. That's where the Lord dwells. He picked one spot on earth, and this is the aim of his prayer, is we want to get back to Jerusalem. It's in ruins. We want to fix it back up so you'll be back there. That's the thing I would be feeling too, is we've been in exile too long. We need to go back. It's a mess over there, and that's the one spot you said you picked. So let us get back there and fix it up. Now he says, when is this? He's praying and confessing his sins. More than likely, this is the hour of prayer. You'll find that there are hours designated for certain things, like the Muslim, every 30 minutes they got to bow down on a piece of carpet and say some mumbo jumbo. But biblically, that started biblically. There were 3 times that they were supposed to pray throughout the day. Daniel 6, verse 10. Daniel 6:10. Says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being opened, his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. That is the 3 times that were prescribed, and we'll go through them. He was obeying that rule. Psalm 55 verse 17. Psalm 55, 17. Here's the Jewish way of thinking. We think of morning, noon, and night. They don't. They think this way. Evening and morning and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. It was a designated time. The Catholics want to have a designated place that they can get forgiveness. You go into a little closet room, and some voice speaks to you from an unseen chamber on the other side. Yeah, and gives you forgiveness of sin. Here in the Old Testament, it was 3 times you were supposed to meet with your God during the day, and 3 times a year all the males were supposed to appear. That 3 is important. Acts 3, verse 1. Now we're given the actual time of day it is. Acts 3:1. Now Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. Okay, the 9th hour, that's when they go in. That's 3 o'clock. Mark 15, verse 34. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is, by being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? This is his cry on the cross. That's at the hour of prayer. I think it's interesting that he's praying himself at the prescribed time of prayer, even though he's on the cross. Daniel 9, verse 21. He says, yea, whilst I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. So the 3 times, and this happens to be the evening. It's called an oblation. That's obviously prayer for Daniel. However, if you study it in the Old Testament, an oblation is a sacrifice. So obviously he's not cutting up a lamb or a goat or a turtle dove or anything. That's right.
I'll wait till after church to call you.
This is the evening oblation of jazz music. Now, He says about the time of the evening oblation. In the Old Testament, an oblation is a sacrifice. It's something you go to the temple and the priest does an oblation. Here it's the sacrifice of his lips, as David would call it. Verse 22, and he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. Don't you wish sometimes that would happen to you? Skill and understanding. Genesis 24. Genesis 24. Our verse said, Daniel was surprised at what happened. There's a reason he's surprised. He says, I was praying, and while I was speaking, all of a sudden somebody showed up and said, I'm giving you skill and understanding. And he probably said, well, I asked for it 3 years ago when all these vision things started, and nobody would help me back then. No, he's getting it now. Genesis 24, verse 12. God's in control of when you get answers. And he rarely does it on our schedule. There are certain passages of the Bible, we covered a heavy one this morning, where you just don't get an answer right off the bat. You got to study and work at it, and you appreciate the answer when you find it. Sunday school, we were not fighting, but we were trying to decide who wrote Hebrews. And it's no fun if you just say Paul wrote it. You got to do the math on it first. Genesis 24:12. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. You know what we're talking about. Eliezer is gone. Well, I say Eliezer. People do this. He's not named Eliezer. We know that his servant is named Eliezer. In this passage, it simply says his servant. There's a reason for that, because the Holy Spirit doesn't talk about himself. So there's no name given here. But more than likely it was Eliezer. Verse 15. And it came to pass before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Micah, the wife of Nahor, Abram's brother, and her pitcher upon her shoulders. So here, before he's even done praying, God's already sent the answer. A lot of times that's happened in our life, and you'll realize it many times after the fact, that the thing that you had been worried about, God was already working on the solution to it while you were sitting there praying for it. Psalm 65. Psalm 65, verse 5. Psalm 65:5, he says, by terrible things in righteousness wilt thou answer us. Now that's a puzzle right there. Terrible things, full of terror. Now, you think that's going to be a bad thing, but then he says, in righteousness. So it can't be bad. It would be a terror to the flesh, maybe, a terror to the works of iniquity. That would be, you want that to be scared out of you. He says, O God of our salvation, who art the confidence of all the ends of the earth, and of them that are afar off upon the sea. I just like that. That's got a great sound to it. I'm not even forgetting the people out in the boats in the middle of the sea. That doesn't mean too much to us land animals. However, if you get stuck out in the sea, it suddenly means something. Where there's no cell phone tower, and you're stuck and a storm shows up, you suddenly get real close to God. He says in Isaiah 65. Isaiah 65, verse 24. And it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer. Okay, how is he going to answer if they didn't ask? He says, I know they're asking. They're moving in that direction. 3 times a day they were supposed to be doing it. So he knows if they're heading that way or not. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. And that's exactly what happened in Daniel. Now, those are immediate and quick responses. You can find them all throughout the Bible. Nehemiah has the same thing. Over and over you see this happen, but not always. Sometimes it's a real long time before he answers. And we'll get to some of those in the next chapter. We'll find a 21-day period. Daniel 9, verse 23. At the beginning of thy supplication, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee For thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. Okay, so he says, I'm here and I've come for a reason. I'm on a mission, and I want you to understand some things. Daniel 10, look at verse 12. Daniel 10, verse 12. Over and over, Daniel has to get a refresher course of understanding and skill and wisdom, just as we do. Daniel 10, verse 12. Then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. Now, that's interesting. He said, from the very first time you decided to chasten yourself, God didn't have to do that for you. You chose to chasten yourself. Then God took note. He already knew what answers and visions he was going to give them. He says, I'm looking for somebody who's worthy of it. There were 4 candidates down there. Daniel and his 3 Hebrew friends. Of the 3, obviously, Daniel had more on the ball. Maybe he was better at chastening himself. Well, we've seen so far that he was fasting and put on sackcloth and ashes and the whole 9 yards. I don't read about anybody else doing that. Okay, so he was serious before God, and God took note of it. Leviticus 16. Leviticus 16:29. Leviticus 16:29. And this shall be a statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, ye shall afflict your souls, and do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country or a stranger that sojourneth among you. Okay, so he says there's an appointed day that what you're supposed to do is afflict your soul. Okay, that's not your flesh. We can afflict partially. That's easy to do. I'm going to forego this, but that's like Hunter. He gets off of. Oh, I'm on Hunter O'Biden tonight. He's what he does is he goes from crack to cocaine. You just switch out one drug for the other. Okay, you didn't really reform anything. We can do partial and halves and things like this. He says here you're going to afflict your soul. That's the psyche, that's the internal, that's who you are, the soul of man. And of course, if you're afflicting the soul, it is affecting all the rest of you. Look at it in verse 31, Leviticus 16:31. It shall be a Sabbath of rest unto you. Now, it's not the kind of rest we're thinking about. And you shall afflict your souls by a statute forever. Rest meaning ceasing from doing something else, not rest as in relaxation and enjoyment. Obviously, affliction is not enjoyment. Numbers 29:7. Numbers 29:7. And ye shall have on the 10th day of this 7th month an holy convocation, and ye shall afflict your souls. Ye shall not do any work therein. So work is not an affliction. Work is a good thing. If you have work, that's good. That's a blessing. He says, don't work this day. I want you afflicted. Get stuck where you don't have a job or there's nothing to do. That's affliction. You like having work. You like having something to do. If you're bored and nothing to do, I think I've been bored twice in my life. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But having work and having something you can be involved in is a great thing. He says, no, stop that. Affliction is you talking to me and you confessing, obviously, like Daniel did, not only his sins, but when he ran out of his list, he went to somebody else's. Psalm 69. Here's one way of doing it. Psalm 69:10. When I wept and chastened my soul with fasting, that was to my reproach. That is, you find You know things nobody else knows, and we don't need to know. But you know the things that you can chasten your own soul with before God. That's healthy. And it should be to a state that produces tears, he says, and fasting, push away from the pleasure of flesh. He says in our passage in, where are we? Daniel 9:23. He says, "For thou art greatly beloved." He's called the beloved. Now, of course, that's a title we get, but that's a strange title in the Old Testament. Daniel 10, verse 11. It's such a unique title. God says it 3 times so that we recognize there's something special about Daniel and this name he's giving him. Daniel 10:11. "And he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright, for unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoke this word unto me, I stood trembling." Look at it in verse 19. Daniel 10:19. "And said, O man greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee. Be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoke unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me." He's beloved, we're beloved. That's a New Testament thing, and we're not beloved because of who we are. Obviously, Daniel had achieved something in the Old Testament that was an exception. Just like David has an exception, he has the sure mercies of David. That is, he got eternal security and didn't know it. I mean, that's great, but he didn't know it. I know it. I think it's double great. Look at it in Ephesians 1. Ephesians 1, verse 6. Here's the reason we're accepted, or we're considered in the beloved. We're accepted. He says, Ephesians 1:6, "To the praise of the glory of his grace, wherein he hath made us accepted in the beloved." You're beloved because you're in the one who is beloved. So they can't separate it. Now, think about that sometimes after you've afflicted yourself. After you've afflicted yourself and gotten right, then realize, hey, look, even with as wicked as you tend to be, you're still in a position that makes you special. You're in the beloved. Therefore, you have the acceptance of God. Colossians 3, verse 12. Colossians 3, verse 12. Now, here's where it becomes clear why Daniel is given this title, beloved. Colossians 3:12. "Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering." Daniel is a picture of the elect in the tribulation. And he's beloved, and he's getting special revelation direct from God, as no doubt they will be. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 12. You don't need verse 12, but I put it in here because it's such a 180 in the passage. You find these, and I always take note of them. It's like the tone switches on a dime. 2 Thessalonians 2:12. "That they all might be damned who believed not in the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." Verse 13. "But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren, beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth." He says right here, you're beloved. So anybody who's saved in this age is beloved. It's sort of like saying saint. We believe, according to the Bible, if you're saved, the second you get saved, you're considered a saint. Paul wrote to saints, and those were living people. It's the same thing as this beloved. The second you get saved, you're considered beloved because you're in the one who is beloved. 2 Peter 1. 2 Peter 1:17. 2 Peter 1:17. "For he received from God the Father honor and glory," referring to Jesus, "when there came such a voice to him from the excellent glory, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. That's quite an accolade. And that's the inference you're given. That's the idea you're supposed to get when you read 3 times God's calling him beloved in the book of Daniel. He said something else in our passage there. Daniel 9:23. Daniel 9:23. He says, how did he say that? He talks about a vision. I got to find the wording on that. I'm in Hosea. How did I get there? Where I start sweating. Daniel 9, where am I? 23, Daniel 9:23. What's the wording? Yeah. And consider the vision. Let's see, that's not. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. Okay, what vision? He's been praying. What vision are we talking about? That's a good question. Okay, let's see if we can find the answer. Verse 21. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning. So, when his visions begin with this man Gabriel, is when we're talking about. That's where he's going back to consider the visions. And that'll run you all the way back to the first time Gabriel shows up and starts talking. Look at in chapter 8, verse 1. Daniel 8, verse 1. So what he's telling him to consider, and he's going to give him understanding with, is every kingdom that follows Babylon and all the events that happen, stretching all the way to Jesus Christ coming back and taking the kingdom. That's quite an understanding. Daniel 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which had appeared unto me at the first. Verse 2. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan the palace, so forth, so on. That's Media and Persia coming in. Verse 16. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the river Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. There's Gabriel connected with the vision. Daniel 8:26. And the vision of the evening and morning which was told is true. There he is again, calling all of these interpretations that he's giving him a vision. Verse 27. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterwards I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. That's the reason we've got what we've got with Gabriel coming back and saying, I'm going to give you skill and understanding. Because at the end of chapter 8, he still didn't know what he was being explained. You ever had that? Somebody explained something to you and it went right over your head? That's exactly what's going on. Daniel 9, verse 24. Daniel 9:24. Now it's about to get heavy duty. And I cannot get into this. I'm just going to start it and then we'll pick it up because it'll take several lessons to get verse 24. Verse 24, he says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and the thing we've been talking about, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So the thing he's getting understanding about is sealing up the vision. Obviously, the vision here is Christ coming back at the second advent and starting his kingdom. So that's quite an understanding Daniel's been given. He's given the same events as John the Revelator is given, and he interprets them a little differently. However, the two, when you put them together, they are good bouncing back and forth so you can understand one or another. Maybe. So Daniel, I don't know how much time we got. We got a little bit of time. Daniel 9:24. He says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. He doesn't have a holy city. But remember, that was the point of his prayer. He was praying for, how did he say it? Holy Zion? No, how did he say it? Holy mountain of my God, that's right. Okay, so that's what he's praying for, and now God's beginning to answer him through this man Gabriel, And he says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, obviously the Jews, and upon thy holy city. There's only one city God considers holy. To finish the transgression. That's painful. That is, the transgression is not yet full. That is, there's still things that have to be worked out. The punishment is not complete. Your prison term is not finished yet. And to make an end of sins. Now, if anybody tells you this chapter is in the past, which we'll find some people who'll do that, maybe we'll get into it, but you'll find people who'll tell you this is a historic chapter and it's all events that have already taken place. It can't have, because people are still sinning. This is supposed to finish sin. Okay? And to make reconciliation for iniquity. Okay? God has decided there's certain things I require before I feel like I've been reconciled for the iniquity done against me. That's not on man. Man can't determine that, because it's God who's the one who was offended. So God is the one who says enough's enough, not man. And to bring in everlasting righteousness. I've heard people try to get around this one, and the way they do it is they bring in everlasting righteousness because you're saved. Okay, yeah, you can stretch it. That's spiritualizing something that's physical. And to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Obviously, there's only one that's the most holy. And that's Jesus Christ. That's going to be second advent. I'm not going to give you any more verses. We don't have time. The focus of the passage, of course, is Jude. Yeah, that's all. Daniel's not worried about Gentiles. He's working with the Gentiles wanting out. So God's not talking about Gentiles getting into Jerusalem. No, he's talking to Daniel about them being restored to their land. The very thing the Israelites are going to be worried about. Now, they're going to be in their land for the first portion of the tribulation. And so what we think, well, why are they worried about getting into the land when they're in the book of Daniel here? Because they're going to get kicked out. It's going to be too hot for them there. Remember, Jesus says when you see this event happen, like Daniel told you, get down from your house and start running. Okay, they've got to flee town. So they'll be praying just like Daniel, restore us back to Jerusalem. And he'll do it. All right, we'll pick up Daniel 9:24 when we get back next week. All right.